WCLN 1170 Radio and Star Vision Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by J.W. Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. The name of the program is We Should Know. We thank Nicole for that introduction she does for us each week. The program is coming to you on WCLN 1170 AM radio, Star Vision TV Channel 16, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 7 p.m. If you happen to not be in the house, you can record us on your DVR, play it back later. Obviously, we're in the Sampson Weekly newspaper. Some of you have told me you read the articles each week as we do a program for you. This is once a week the show comes out. We air 2:30 to 3:30 on Tuesday on WCLN 1170 AM. Also, Star Vision TV 2:30 to 3:30 each and every Tuesday. And again, we ask if you have comments, suggestions about any program or some comment about a program you'd like to see us discuss on this program. It is an information education program. You can email us at weshouldknow.edu@gmail.com. That's weshouldknow.edu@gmail.com. Also, we're on Facebook. If you'd like to, we would like to ask you like us on Facebook at We Should Know. And another little technology engineering thing that we're doing here now. Our producer, Chris Ure, has got us on YouTube, so you can look for the programs to pop up on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, type in We Should Know, EDU, and you can find us there. So today's program, interesting. You've heard a lot about it. We've got a guy with us that is going to tell us more about it, and it's Michael Chestnutt. He's a CPA. And he's as a certified public accountant. He's also a accredited business valuation person, a registered investment advisor, and a certified financial planner. He's a shareholder at Black, Chestnut & Johnson here in Clinton. You've been there since 2003, Michael. Thank you for being with us today. This is an interesting topic we're going to be talking about. Before we get into that, I just want to give you a moment to talk about anything about your background. I know you graduated from East Carolina University. Anything else you want to share with us? You live in the Clinton area here. Obviously, a lot of folks that know you, even see your face pop up here, hear your name, know that you do a lot of work for agricultural industry in the area, and we're talking some pretty huge accounts. So anything else you can tell us about you before we get into this subject today?
Well, we obviously have a broad array of clients in this area. Agriculture is our bread and butter, but being in public accounting, you do have the ability to talk with a bunch of variety of a tremendous number of clients in different industries, and it gives you a good broad background of which to pull from to help advise clients.
You know, Michael, you have been reported in a very positive way of being a very sharp CPA and financial planner in the area, and pretty much on top of your game in about everything you go at. So some of the things we're going to talk about today, before we came on air, I told you, I said we're going to try to keep it where everybody can kind of understand it. So if I ask you a question over again or clarify something, I want to make sure if I understand it, I think pretty much anybody else will understand it. But we're talking about a phrase, a metaphor that's been out there for probably a year or two now that we've been hearing, called the fiscal cliff. That's F-I-S-C-A-L, cliff, C-L-I-F-F. And according to what a bit of research I've done, in fact, this was in the Boston Globe, in a Boston Globe interview, the columnist was Ben Zimmer. He said that this particular phrase came about when the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke, warned of a fiscal cliff that was coming. And this verbiage started in February. However, it was dated back to 1975. The metaphor was used in referring to New York as possibly going over a financial cliff. So do you think that verbiage and terminology is too severe? Is that something that maybe when we use that, it just scares people too much? Or should we be using some other metaphor to describe what's about to happen if there's not some adjustments made in the coming year?
Well, I think it's certainly a term that it's out there to use to invoke a response. Fear is certainly one of those responses that I think that they probably are trying to achieve. To get anybody to move off a certain position, you've got to, I guess, rattle their cage just a little bit so they can realize that, hey, this could be some severe implications if we don't act. So referring to this as a fiscal cliff, I think, is just one way of making it appear as a financial Armageddon, if you will.
And I think it's probably following that thought in the Wall Street Journal. In fact, a recent article that said the fiscal cliff could trigger a recession. And a lot of the information pulled from that came from the Congressional Budget Office, in which there was conversation about what it was going to do to the unemployment rate, and that unemployment rate might even ratchet up to over 9% very quickly if there's not some major adjustments done, and the impact it would have on a huge market base in the country by not acting. How do you react to that, and is it going to be, and does it have the potential of triggering a major recession for us again, even more than the one that we've had in the past 3 or 4 years?
Well, certainly it can. We probably need to back up just a little bit and talk about what the fiscal cliff is and really what it means. It really is on 2 different fronts, hitting at the same time. We've got scheduled tax cuts that will expire at the end of 2012. Many of those are referred to as the Bush-era tax cuts. They will go off at the end of 2012. Also in concert, if you recall back about a year or so ago when we had all these infighting going on, overextending the debt limit so we could keep borrowing money from, let's just be politically correct, borrow more money from a variety of sources to keep our government operating. Part of the negotiations there that fell apart is if they didn't come up with a deal to extend the debt ceiling, you would end up with a bunch of spending cuts called sequestration. They couldn't come up with a grand bargain, so they were left with a bunch of spending cuts that were automatically going to happen at the same time the Bush-era tax cuts. So you have on one hand, you've got tax cuts expiring. On another hand, you've got a bunch of spending cuts that are going to happen to things like defense, to a bunch of different programs in the federal government, and both of those things at one time. So with that, asking the question about, will it lead up to a recession, you have to understand on both fronts, tax increases and spending cuts at the federal level both will contract the economy, because on one hand, if you tax individuals more, businesses more, that means less money that they have disposable to spend. And if the federal government spends less of what it takes in, that's less money that gets flushed out into the economy that can be reinvested in other things. So on both sides of those, the fiscal cliff will contract the economy and quite honestly will most likely lead to recession if something does not happen.
And when we look at that spending process, and you mentioned sequestration, which is a whole nother word in terminology. I think it's, as you said, we probably need to kind of slow down a little bit and look at that. But sequestration, and I want to kind of take the simple approach on this, and for lack of a better explanation, a definition that was described by Tom Morsey here on what sequestration is. He says the Congressional Research Service defines it as this. It says, in general, sequestration, it entails the permanent cancellation of budgetary resources by a uniform percentage. Moreover, this uniform percentage reduction is applied to all programs, projects, and activities within a budget account. So sequestration, to use that term, just simply means that if that goes into effect, there's going to be a lot of cuts that could be made that could be not only dangerous, but literally put in peril a lot of programs and maybe even people in the country, because we're talking about cutting the military and various other programs as well.
No question. I mean, those things, many of the programs that we have in this country are certainly valuable. We need some social safety nets, but let's be perfectly candid. We've got problems on 2 fronts. I mean, the government has a thirst for increased revenue, but revenue alone won't solve its problems. We do have to address some fundamental issues regarding spending, and entitlements are part of that. Things like Social Security and Medicare that were once thought as the third rail of politics that you never wanted to touch because you were more worried about getting reelected than doing the right thing. Those things too have to be in play, and when you look at the Simpson-Bowles Commission, which was championed by President Obama, the level of spending cuts as to tax raises are probably 3 to 5 times as many spending cuts as revenue increases is what's needed if we're really serious about getting our fiscal house in order.
In another recent article I was reading that if you took all looking at cuts, the cut side, if you took all the employees and federal government just reduced everything to dramatic amounts, to all but zero, that it would be a small portion of what it would take to deal with the federal deficit as we move forward. That really, as you said, there's got to be other kinds of things that have got to be cut, looked at, revamped, and dealt with. So as we move forward and we talk about these things, I want folks to understand and our listeners to understand that we're talking about a huge conglomerate of issues here, and it's not just one simplistic move that's going to solve it.
No, and I do think, I mean, the problem is so large that I don't think any one person really can get their mind around exactly what it is. There's so many agencies in the federal government. There's so many layers of bureaucracy. It's almost impossible for one person to completely get their mind around what's happening here. And you've got to start with small incremental pieces and pare this thing down over time. We can't have all this solved on the taxing front. We can't have all this solved on the spending front. It has to be a combination of those two, and we need to do it in a prudent manner.
Well, you know, one of the things I want to do as we continue the discussion, I want to take some of these things that we're kind of laying out up front today, and I want to kind of break those down a little bit to see how they impact people that actually listen to this program here in southeastern North Carolina and how it might impact their lives. So when we look at that and we think about these broad cuts that may or may not occur, it impacts various groups, but I don't really recall any of the major programs in recent months or in the past year that has brought in somebody with your expertise in accounting and in financial planning to talk about the specifics of it. So that's one of the areas I want to get into as we talk about this. Okay. What in your sense, any specific point that you would focus on up front as we're going to go to a break in just a minute, but I want to just kind of give a teaser before we go to break. Any specific point you would want to think that folks really need to know this to start with before we continue discussing?
Well, I think the thing I would leave everybody on this segment for is that right now the fiscal cliff, if it's not addressed in some manner, will affect 90% of all people in this country.
You heard it, ladies and gentlemen. 90% of the people in the country is going to be affected in some way by this whole issue of what the fiscal cliff is. We're going to be back in a minute talking with Michael Chestnutt, CPA financial planner right here in Clinton, North Carolina with We Should Know.
Hello everyone, this is Jim Darden. After 25 years of teaching horticulture at Sampson Community College, I've retired to devote my full attention to Darden's Nursery and Landscaping, where we have grown local azaleas, trees, and other landscape plants for over 30 years. And our landscaping division has designed and installed hundreds of residential and commercial landscapes, irrigation, sodding, and night light systems as well. Please give me a call at 590-9689 or at home at 592-1424, and let's get started on your landscape. Our initial consultation is free. Congratulations to J.W. Simmons on an outstanding program, We Should Know.
Hi, I'm Cliff Ireland with the Small Business Center at Sampson Community College. We offer things like one-on-one individual confidential counseling sessions. We offer assistance to both startup businesses and existing businesses. We have a network of referrals both here in the county and outside the county. And in addition, we offer year-round seminars and workshops in professional development. One of the neat things about the Small Business Center is that for the majority of the programs, it is at little or no cost to Small Business Center clients or seminar participants. Now, if you want to know how we can help you or help your business, please call 592-7176 at Sampson Community College.
You really thought about what you have to lose if you drink and drive?
This is your district attorney, Ernie Lee. You could lose your privilege to drive and spend serious jail time.
Hello, I'm Cindy Joyner. Driving impaired can make your insurance increase significantly and could create problems in finding a quality insurance plan.
This is Sherry Matthews with the Sampson Independent. Your name could appear in the local media, causing embarrassment to your family, friends, and coworkers.
Hi, this is Luis Torres from Murphy Brown LLC. You know, you could even lose your job, resulting in severe hardship for you and your family.
Hi, this is Dr. Tommy Newton, and personal injuries to yourself and others may often be severe and permanently disabling.
I'm Laura Bradshaw, a member of SAD. The most important loss may be your life or the life of someone else.
This is Cindy Joyner with Lockamy Tech Insurance. We are pleased to sponsor this message. Join us as we promote safer communities and help prevent needless tragedies.
Remember, don't lose your privilege to drive. This is First Sergeant Ricky Hooks with the North Carolina State Highway Patrol. For additional information, call 910-592-3141.
Health Mart Pharmacy.
A real live person. It's just like Jenny told me.
Another friend of Jenny's. Great. I've met about 3 of Jenny's friends just this week.
You'll meet more of us. Jenny was telling all of us last week how great Health Mart is.
At Health Mart, all of our pharmacists take the time to get to know our patients, explain their medications, and answer any questions they may have. We really believe in better care and better service.
Can I stop in after work?
Absolutely.
Health Mart, caring for you and about you.
For all of your prescription and health care needs, shop Matthews Health Mart in the Jordan Shopping Plaza or call 592-3121.
I'm Gary Hall, manager of Sessoms Jewelry. We are proud to be sponsors of JW's We Should Know. At Sessoms Jewelry, we've always strived to give you the latest in technical advice and knowledge on our merchandise. Remember, we should know at Sessoms Jewelry, downtown Clinton.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. The program is We Should Know. We're talking with Michael Chestnutt, CPA, financial planner. He's a registered investment advisor as well, and also accredited business valuation person here in Clinton. He is a shareholder with Black, Chestnut & Johnson, PA, Clinton, North Carolina. Michael, you just do a lot of stuff with large corporations, large businesses, individuals. You look at the whole area, the whole broad area. Obviously, many years' experience in accounting. I want to take those years of experience and maybe get you to talk to us about some of these areas that is going to be impacted in some way by this idea of the federal government, that is the people that we elected, our Congress, and if they're not acting and they don't act or they do act, how is it going to affect us in some of those areas? One of the areas I think that that often I think about more than maybe I should, probably because of age, is this whole issue of, is referred to as entitlements. It's called Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. These are the kinds of things that a lot of folks, a lot of experts are putting verbiage out saying something's got to be done there, something's got to be adjusted there, and if not, we're going to be in even a worse financial crisis. How critical is that going to be for somebody to focus on that rather than just saying we got to spend federal cuts federal spending, or we've got to have more companies signing on and growth of companies? I know all of it plays together, but how critical is the Medicaid, Medicare issue?
Well, I don't think there's any question. I have to give President Obama credit for trying to tackle the issue of health care. It's one of our biggest fundamental drivers of our cost increases for the country. We did have a large swath of our population that was uninsured, so we were either going to pay directly or indirectly for those people that didn't have insurance. I disagree, I think, personally with how it all went down in a totally partisan manner, but there's no question that is a driver. What most likely is going to happen with things like Medicare, already with Medicaid, Medicaid is a program primarily for the poor and indigent, is you will have more means testing that will happen. You already have it in so many areas. Take, for instance, say your Medicare premiums that you would have if you were receiving Social Security. The Medicare premiums, depending on how much your income is, your Medicare premiums are slid accordingly. So if you fall below a certain threshold, your Medicare premiums are $90, $95 a month. I think they're inflation adjusted for next year around $100, $105. But if you had too much income, your Medicare premiums may be $150, $170 a month. So you already have sliding scale adjustments depending on how prosperous you have been personally. The problem, the moral hazard with all of this is you turn these programs from what is a program that essentially you've helped pay for during your life to almost a full-blown welfare program, and that becomes the moral hazard. Do you penalize people who have done a really good job of saving for themselves and taking that program away from them in favor of the ones that maybe have made some poor choices? And I personally struggle with that mentally, and I don't know that that's the right thing to do, but we will have more of a movement in that direction, meaning if you've done a good job saving for yourself, more of those programs are going to cost you proportionally more than it will for the ones that have not.
And these are big picture changes for the country when we look at federal taxes and federal taxation. And I would say, as we talk about this and we talk about the fiscal cliff, there's also impacts with what happens on the federal level with state taxes and the relationship with those taxes as well. It would just seem to me that there would be a direct relationship in the sense of what happens with federal income tax, and if there's money not coming into the feds where the state has been receiving money from the federal government, then the state's got to react in a proportional way.
Well, let's be honest. I mean, part of the balancing act that's going to happen, and I preach this to as many people that will listen just to try to get ready for this, is part of the balancing act is going to be the feds are going to push things down to the state. Well, what do you think the state's going to do? The state's going to push things down to the county, to the local city level, to, you've got to pay for as many things as you can locally. So, I mean, are they really solving the problems, or are they pushing the problems down to a lower level? So what you're going to most likely have is you're going to have county commissioners having to be forced to raise property tax rates or come up with different creative ways to raise income to account for programs that they're having to pay for they were never able to pay for in the past.
I was talking to a group a while back, Michael, and there was a discussion about accountability, and there seems to be a real sense, and probably one that should have been in place a long time ago, but a real sense of more scrutiny on public jobs, public contracts, public functions, public spending as a whole. Do you see that dynamic ratcheting up even more so as we go into some of these additional programs, especially with health care? Is there going to be a closer look at how that money's spent, where it's spent, what various bureaucratic positions are, and those kinds of things?
Well, you would hope. I mean, you kept hearing this phrase waste, fraud, and abuse, waste, fraud, and abuse. You're not going to solve this problem completely by that, but you want to make sure that when money is spent, a program's in place, that the money is being spent wisely and it's the best use of our taxpayer money. But we won't get there completely off of that side of the equation.
Well, and the other side of that thought is we look at spending, and folks tend to look at it from whatever window they're looking out of. So as you're talking to our audience today, and these folks are looking at it, as you said a while ago, what should they be prepared for? The person that's out there that maybe is in that bracket of less than $100,000 a year, even less than $50,000 or $30,000 a year, and they're listening to, well, really, is it going to impact me? Am I going to know a difference? What should I expect, or should I consider myself or render myself harmless in this and say, well, I've heard the president say if you make over $250,000 a year, you don't have to worry about it. Well, most folks will go, well, wow, I really don't have to worry about it. But there's impacts on all levels of income, even if you're just sitting there with, and there's millions of people out there that sit there with incomes with Social Security that maybe are bringing in a certain amount of rent money off of farmland that they've got to turn around and then pay county taxes on. How does it impact these various groups of people?
Well, I mean, you have to look at it, and I think everyone's going to be impacted in some way or another. The definition of what constitutes wealth in this country is kind of all over the board. But as I said before, everybody is going to be impacted either directly or indirectly. If the high net worth individual, has, almost all of the tax burden, and the statistics show that, 5% of the people essentially pay, I think, 58% of the total tax burden in this country. Then they're going to have less money to spend, less money to invest in different opportunities, which is going to have an indirect impact on all of us individually. So first and foremost, you'll see that. But let's be honest. I mean, if we're going to solve this thing, the tax increase component on the high net worth individuals, last year we had $1 trillion deficit, $1 trillion. I remember when $1 million was a lot of money. It's not a lot of money anymore. But $1 trillion deficit, that's just 1 year where we spent more than we took in. The tax increase on the high net worth individuals that they're talking about that is so polarizing right now is about $80 billion of $1 trillion. Let's round it up for easy math to $100 billion a year. That's less than 10% of the problem we've got. So that tells me right there, I mean, look at the law of large numbers here. Where is the money? And I said before, 90% of the people in this country will be impacted by, what's coming up with the fiscal cliff if it's not addressed. Most of the money on the revenue side is not for the people that's above $250,000. It's for the people below $250,000 because there's so many more in that category. So many aspects of the Bush tax cut move people, quite honestly, off the tax rolls. I mean, you've got essentially half the people, I think it's 47%, and that was a number that Romney kind of got in trouble for during the electoral cycle. But you got roughly half the people that essentially are not contributing to the economy from an income tax standpoint. So, and that's primarily due to earned income credit, child tax credit, education credits, a variety of different things. I'm not saying it's necessarily bad public policy. It's just a fact. You've got people that aren't contributing at least to our federal income, if you will. So from that standpoint, I mean, obviously we want to have a social safety net of some sort, but at what point in time is it too much? I mean, again, if we're truly about getting our fiscal house in order, it has got to be a combination of revenue increases, either in growing the economy or raising the tax rates or eliminating deductions, but it also has to be in concert with spending cuts as well. Again, I mean, if we were to raise the taxes that they're proposing on the wealthy, it's going to account for less than 10% of last year's deficit, 10%. So don't fool yourself into thinking that you're going to balance this whole thing off the backs of the 1% to 2%. It's not going to happen. And if you're going to put the fiscal house in order, it's going to have to come to you. I mean, you've heard the old adage, you know the difference between a depression and a recession. A recession is when, you know, you lose your job. A depression is when I lose my job, right. Okay? Everybody is going to be impacted by this if we're truly going to, you know, solve the problem. So we're on a trajectory that's not sustainable, and that has to be remedied, and it's going to have to be remedied in some way. And some of your favored deductions, like mortgage interest, for instance, or state income taxes that you may deduct as an itemized deductions, or even charitable contributions, which locally would be a big deal, are on the chopping block. So, I mean, you may see some of those things go away, and that's probably some of what's got to happen.
And when we come back from our break in just a minute, I want you to talk more about some of those specific things like charitable contributions and some of the others you mentioned. But particularly when we look at that, we are talking to a large portion of the population that depend on some of those deductions to keep their taxes bottom line, so they don't have to pay the federal government so much. And it may be the difference between $2,000 or $3,000 may not seem like a significant amount depending on what bracket financial income you're in, but to a lot of folks, that's a huge amount of money.
Oh, there's no question. A lot of people now, if you'll look back at the history of taxes, standard deductions, which you have 2 tracks that you can figure, it's actually 3 tracks, but 2 tracks you can figure income tax on for most people. You either itemize your deductions, which means you add up your medical expenses, your mortgage interest, your property taxes, your charitable contributions. You add all those things up and you compare it to what's called a standard deduction. If it doesn't add up to the standard deduction, you take the standard deduction because that's the higher number. The majority of people in this country fill out their taxes using the standard deductions, partly because it's easy and partly because that gives them the greatest benefit. So with that being said, eliminating their state income tax deduction or eliminating their mortgage interest or eliminating their charitable contribution means nothing to them because they're not itemizing right now. But for those that do, that's where you end up with some of the rub here.
We're going to take a quick break, Michael, and we'll follow that thought when we come back. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to We Should Know. We're talking with Michael Chestnutt, CPA here in Clinton.
Sampson County's free community newspaper is on the stands. Read all about our community news, sports, lifestyles, weddings, education, obituaries, classifieds, and much more community information. Know what's going on in your community. Read the Sampson Weekly. Submit your ideas to the Sampson Weekly at thesampsonweekly.com. Read the entire newspaper online at thesampsonweekly.com. The Sampson Weekly wants to celebrate with the residents of Sampson County. Send all your news and announcements, events, and achievements to information at thesampsonweekly.com. See the Sampson Weekly for details. Help the Sampson Weekly create a buzz. Tell your friends and family. There's a new weekly newspaper in Sampson County. The Sampson Weekly. Local sports, local news, obituaries, wedding announcements, current events, and much, much more. Look for it every Wednesday. For a limited time, free yard sale listings will be in our classified section. Go to our website, click on the classified section, and fill out the form. As long as space is available, we will publish your yard sales information. Sampson County's free community newspaper. Get your copy.
I'm Gary Hall, manager of Sessoms Jewelry. We are proud to be sponsors of JW's We Should Know. At Sessoms Jewelry, we've always strived to give you the latest in technical advice and knowledge on our merchandise. Remember, we should know at Sessoms Jewelry, downtown Clinton.
Huff Orthopedics and Sports Medicine is pleased to be a part of the community. Each and every patient we have served over the past 13 years has been given the most current and professional care available anywhere. As a board-certified orthopedic surgeon and certified sports medicine surgeon, I am committed to improving the quality of life through the latest in medical science and surgical procedures when needed. Huff Orthopedics and Sports Medicine is located at 520 Beeman Street, directly across from Sampson Regional Medical Center in Clinton. We look forward to serving you. Call us today at 910-596-5633 for an appointment. I am Dr. Alex Huff, and we are pleased to sponsor We Should Know with J.W. Simmons.
Health Mart Pharmacy.
A real live person. It's just like Jenny told me.
Another friend of Jenny's. Great. I've met about 3 of Jenny's friends just this week.
You'll meet more of us. Jenny was telling all of us last week how great Health Mart is.
At Health Mart, all of our pharmacists take the time to get to know our patients, explain their medications, and answer any questions they may have. We really believe in better care and better service.
Can I stop in after work?
Absolutely.
Health Mart, caring for you and about you.
For all of your prescription and health care needs, shop Matthews Health Mart in the Jordan Shopping Plaza or call 592-3121.
I'm Gary Hall, manager of Sessoms Jewelry. We are proud to be sponsors of JW's We Should Know. At Sessoms Jewelry, we've always strived to give you the latest in technical advice and knowledge on our merchandise. Remember, we should know at Sessoms Jewelry, downtown Clinton.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. The name of the program is We Should Know. We're talking about financial stuff today. We're talking about the fiscal cliff. I want to give a shout out to all of our listeners out there. A lot of those folks on green and red tractors, and Christopher and Larry Naylor, and all of those folks that listen to us in the Vans Crossroads area up there. It's all over Sampson County, growing agriculture here in eastern North Carolina. We give a shout out to all those Boogie Shoes listeners that listen to the Boogie Shoes radio network with Robert Stroud. Robert keeps their program alerted down there, what our program's going to be. We want to thank Robert for that. We're talking with Michael Chestnut. Michael, you're a CPA, certified public accountant. You're accredited with it as a business valuation person here. You're a registered investment advisor, and you're also a certified financial planner. A lot of titles, a lot of numbers and letters after your name. You've been in it for quite some time, right here in the Clinton area, and worked in Goldsboro for some time. You graduated from East Carolina. Want folks to understand that as we come back. We're talking about some of the specifics of what this whole program is going to do to their lives. You indicated early on at least 90% of the population is going to be impacted if there's something not done. On the other side, if there's something done, they're still going to be impacted, because what you're telling us is that something has got to change. There has got to be a difference in what we're doing. We've already talked about the amount when we're talking about, as you said a while ago, big numbers. And these big numbers, we're talking in the trillions. And millions baffles me, but when you get into billions and trillions, it's like, okay, I've lost my hands and toes. We can't count anymore. We got to stop. But when you talk about those numbers, the average person just cannot, I don't think they can just relate to the volume of debt we're in. Now, the last time I looked at it, the clock was ticking on the national debt somewhere in the range of 15 to 16 trillion. Is it still ticking and ratcheting up as we talk today?
It is, and based on current estimates, that within 4 years we'll be at approximately $20 trillion of total debt. I mean, you have to remember, I think people probably get confused as to what the two things mean. Deficit means annually what you spend versus what you take in. That is your current deficit. Debt is your accumulation over time that you've spent more than you've taken in. So we're currently at about $16 trillion of total national debt, and we're currently spending more by about $1 trillion a year than we're taking in. So as you can see, the math is pretty simple. 16 plus, approximately four more years at $1 trillion a year, and we're at about $20 trillion of national debt.
If you took that and moved it down to the micro level of an individual household, we would already be bankrupt and probably being kicked out of our house and living under a bridge, right?
Well, I mean, you've heard the old adage, the only thing new is the history you don't know. I mean, we're having history play out in front of us right now. I mean, all you have to do is look at Europe. It's laughable that all of this was created because of the Bush tax cuts and everything that happened in this country. We've got some fundamental problems that we have to address, and all you have to do is look at what they refer to as pigs, Portugal, Greece, Spain, Italy. Those countries have really got fundamental problems over there that they still haven't addressed. And quite honestly, I would not be shocked to see a country like Greece have to pull out of the euro because you've got on one hand the Germans, who still have a fairly prosperous economy. Questionable whether they've slipped back into recession. are they going to prop up a country that they don't view as someone that works as hard, that's as dedicated, that's done a good job of saving for themselves? So you extrapolate that to this country, and we look at the closest analogy we would have, I think, would be California. You know, how much does Texas and North Carolina and states that may have done a better job, and North Carolina, quite honestly, has not done a great job. Look at our unemployment rate. How much do we have to bear of their burdens? I mean, they've done some crazy things, in my opinion, especially with the way they fund public pension benefits, for instance. They're out of control, and it has to be reformed and changed. When you have someone you pay in retirement more than you do when they're actively working for you, you've got a problem with the way that program's set up. And there's been several examples of say, a public firefighter in California, just because of the way they have the ability to take their vacation and sick days and accumulate those in the very last years and take that as a large bonus in the final year. They actually can get more in retirement than when they were working. And there's something wrong with that funding formula, and things like that have to change. It's just not sustainable.
And I think those are the kinds of changes that we're discussing that's got to be put into place going forward. Now, I'm not sure about those that are already in effect and people over 60 years of age. They're pretty much locked in, I would think. But when you start looking at it going forward, something has to be done now to affect it 5, 6 years out, 10 years out.
Yeah, I mean, you hear the whole thing. Like, let's take Medicare and Social Security, for instance. I mean, the cutoff age for a lot of people in terms of whether changes are going to occur is probably 50 to 55. You've spent your whole life, investing, dollar cost averaging, ever what you want to call it, into a program that you thought was going to be there. It probably needs to be there. I'm 44. Is the program going to be there for me? If you were to ask most people my age or younger, they're not relying on Social Security or Medicare, and quite honestly, if you were to allow us to opt out of it, most of us would. But, I do understand the human psyche, and most people are probably not going to do a very good job of saving for themselves, so you do need some social safety net. With that being said, the program, again, is going to be more means-tested. If you do a good job saving for yourself, there's going to be less there for you, either because they're going to tax it more or reduce your benefit or charge you more for being in the program. 2, they're also going to raise things like the retirement age. Full retirement age for Social Security is 67, depending on your age, but for most people that are my age, it's 67. To go on Medicare is 65. Quite honestly, part of the solution for those is going to be to raise the age. As we're living longer, we're funding essentially a third of someone's life in retirement potentially, and that is probably too long. I mean, to be honest, actuarially, it's just not achievable to have 20, 30 years of a funding for someone that probably only spent a little more than that in active employment contributing to the system. So the pyramid's turned upside down.
And as we look at that, as you said, pyramid, and we look at what's going on, I think a couple of points in taking away points of what you just said is that folks in your age bracket that are in that kind of middle year, whatever you want to call it, age bracket, I think they probably are looking at more of an investment-based, what I make, where am I going to put it. They're strategists, folks like you that talk about financial planning to clients are telling them, look, you really need to look at this in a different way than somebody that's 60 years old or older that's already got it there. That's because, as folks, and I'll say like us, already moved forward, but people that are there coming in that may be listening to this program today, it's a very serious point. They need to sit down and look closely at what their income is, what is going into that squirrel basket that they're holding for 60 and beyond, and make sure that the accountability of that is correct. Because when we're talking about this fiscal cliff, and in fact, there's an article here that I'm looking at from the Wall Street Journal that talks about the impacts on in fact, the American Society of Pension and professional arbitraries have looked at it and said, look, we've got some serious concerns here going into this fiscal cliff situation because we've got all these 401ks out there, and all of a sudden the world's changing. And it's going to impact, we're talking huge amounts of investment dollars that are funding retirement. So I think you're right on point with that.
No, and one thing I try to preach and get people to take into consideration is the stealth tax that most people never think about is inflation. Inflation is the one thing that erodes into someone's spending dollars in retirement. All you have to do is ask a person in the family. Now, it used to be you would say it's the mother. I guess that's a sexist thing to say now. But ask someone that goes to the grocery store if they understand inflation. And food inflation has been pretty rampant. Corn prices, for instance, $3 to $5 several years ago is now $7, $8, in some cases $9, depending on the circumstance. So you've got those things that are going to erode someone's purchasing power. And looking at a long-term perspective, if you were to give me the option to take even some, maybe half of the money I'm contributing to the Social Security system, for instance, and opt out and let me form my own private account. I know private accounts have been scrutinized as voodoo math. I'd love to have the option. Over the long-term time horizon, having your money in a money market account or a CD at my age is kryptonite. It's the dumbest thing you can do. So financially, that is not the right prudent path for most people. And again, even when someone is in retirement, one of the crazier things to do is to take all your balls, go to the house, quit, the game's over with. I'm going to have all my money in what I perceive as the safest investment, and tell me what you're getting on your money market account right now. How good do you feel about that 0.4%? And that's if you're lucky. I mean, you're just not keeping pace with inflation. And guys, I'm telling you, that's coming, and that'll be the number one thing that really eats your lunch in the next 5 years. It will take until we get back to some semblance of full employment. It's hard to have rampant inflation overall when you have as many people unemployed as we currently have, but it will come. I mean, you can't have the printing presses running like it's running right now on the U.S. currency without having inflation at some point in time. Bernanke says that we don't, and we don't. I use the analogy, I don't eat big screen TVs. If big screen TVs come down in price, it may keep the overall inflation in check, but last time I checked, I can't feed my family on the big screen TV, and it's certainly not going to put gas in my tank. So when you look at the two things that a lot of people measure, fuel prices and food prices, their net check goes a whole lot. It doesn't go quite as far as it once did.
And all of these things are heavy weighted subjects that folks really need to consider, Michael, and as they're listening today and we're talking to those folks, they need to sit down now, especially depending on what age they are. And I think you were very much on point when you talk about the younger ages, sitting down and looking at their accounting. What's going on with that? Where's that money going? How much am I setting aside? I mean, I can think back when I was in my 30s and 40s. I didn't think about that much. It was pretty much just, go to work, do your job, try to, stay in the jungle, get it done, whatever you needed to do, and work, pay your debts, those kinds of things. And investment, was in a home. Investment was in having something that was tangible. And now we're in an era that's not a real reality anymore, and tangibility is not necessarily the best investment.
Yeah, I try to encourage, people that are starting out in their 20s, if they will get on a program where they're setting aside approximately 10% of their income aside for retirement in a 401k, they'll be set regardless.
We're going to take a break. We're going to be back. We've got some real big issues to talk about in the last segment. So, ladies and gentlemen, stay with us. We'll be back with Michael Chestnutt and Mark.
Health Mart Pharmacy.
A real live person. It's just like Jenny told me.
Another friend of Jenny's. Great. I've met about 3 of Jenny's friends just this week.
You'll meet more of us. Jenny was telling all of us last week how great Health Mart is.
At Health Mart, all of our pharmacists take the time to get to know our patients, explain their medications, and answer any questions they may have. We really believe in better care and better service.
Can I stop in after work?
Absolutely.
Health Mart, caring for you and about you.
For all of your prescription and health care needs, shop Matthews Health Mart in the Jordan Shopping Plaza or call 592-3121.
Hello, everyone. This is Jim Darden. After 25 years of teaching horticulture at Sampson Community College, I've retired to devote my full attention to Darden's Nursery and Landscaping, where we have grown local azaleas, trees, and other landscape plants for over 30 years. And our landscaping division has designed and installed hundreds of residential and commercial landscapes, irrigation, sodding, and night light systems as well. Please give me a call at 590-9689 or at home at 592-1424, and let's get started on your landscape. Our initial consultation is free. Congratulations to J.W. Simmons on an outstanding program, We Should Know.
I'm Gary Hall, manager of Sessoms Jewelry. We are proud to be sponsors of J.W.'s We Should Know. At Sessoms Jewelry, we've always strived to give you the latest in technical advice and knowledge on our merchandise. Remember, We Should Know at Sessoms Jewelry, downtown Clinton.
Interstar Communications, our local area internet provider, invites you to discover the wonders of the web with their unlimited internet services for only $19.95 a month. That's right, for only $19.95 a month, you'll have the whole world at your fingertips anytime or all the time with Interstar Communications. Plus, with Interstar's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week technical support at no extra charge, you'll have more than the local internet provider on your side. You'll have the whole internet team. So stop by today and see the friendly folks at Interstar Communications, 102 Sampson Street here in Clinton, or you can call them at 564-4638 and get started today on your adventure in the World Wide Web.
Huff Orthopedics and Sports Medicine is pleased to be a part of the community. Each and every patient we have served over the past 13 years has been given the most current and professional care available anywhere. As a board-certified orthopedic surgeon and certified sports medicine surgeon, I am committed to improving the quality of life through the latest in medical science and surgical procedures when needed. Huff Orthopedics and Sports Medicine is located at 520 Beeman Street, directly across from Sampson Regional Medical Center in Clinton. We look forward to serving you. Call us today at 910-596-5633 for an appointment. I am Dr. Alex Huff, and we are pleased to sponsor We Should Know with J.W. Simmons.
Ladies and gentlemen, the name of the program is We Should Know. Thank you for staying with us. We're in our kind of our last segment here. We're talking about a very important topic. We're talking about finances. We're talking about the fiscal cliff. We've discussed what it is. We've discussed some of the things that may or may not happen. The 90% of the people out there it's going to impact. Michael Chestnutt's with us. He's a CPA, a certified financial planner. He's a registered investment advisor. He's a certified to do a number of things with business evaluations and planning and all these kinds of things, Michael, that you've been into. Thank you for being with us today. This is our last segment. I want you to take time just for a minute and not only look in your crystal ball, but look out the window where you actually see some of the facts that may happen. What are some of the specifics that folks need to think about that's going to impact them as we move toward this fiscal cliff that may be to different people, I guess it could be traumatic. To others, it may not. But tell us some of those points they need to look at that we've kind of taken for granted over the past few years that we've taken as tax credits that we're just not going to get anymore.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I think probably at the end of the day, most people will still end up getting some of those credits, if not all of those credits. Call it kicking the can down the road. Probably what is going to happen is one of two scenarios. Something has probably worked out in the lame duck session of Congress that we're currently in. That may or may not happen. They'll probably work out some sort of framework, that they can achieve probably in the first part of next year. But again, most people that are below the $250,000 could be impacted by this substantially. Things like the child tax credit, for instance, which is right now currently $1,000 for each child under the age of 16, will go back to $500. Things like the American Opportunity Tax Credit, which funds college education for the first 4 years of college, part of that would be refundable as well, even if you had no income taxes. Would revert back to what was the old education credit routine before that. So those things, which have been tremendous boons for people below $125,000 of income or less, are scheduled to expire at the end of this year. Other things like the education deduction, if your income will say slightly above that, which is currently capped at $4,000, has already expired. Things like the educator expense. If you were a teacher and you bought supplies, and every teacher I know buys some supplies for school, there was a provision in the old law that gave you the ability to take up to $250 as an item, or not an itemized, but an above-the-line deduction. That's already expired. So a lot of the goodies that are in these old programs, if they don't get extended in some capacity, are going to affect, like I said, about 90% of the people in this country and not just the wealthy. Now, I do think that probably gets worked out, but some of the things that we talked about earlier that you like mortgage interest deduction and charitable contributions, they may be on the chopping block, and you may not get those as deductions going forward, or they may be curbed substantially. This is going to be a boon for one industry. The lobbying industry on K Street up in Washington is going to be spending the next, 2 months probably lobbying pretty heavily in Congress to make sure their constituents, whether it's the mortgage bankers or the Realtors Association or nonprofit orgs will all be lobbying Congress, leave us alone, but make no bones about it, if we're serious about solving the problem. And I think it's a moral issue. I mean, there's something morally wrong about leaving our kids worse off than we currently have it. Right now, I mean, there's a fundamental shift, at least in my mind. You know, I tell people all the time, the way I look at it, I want it to be as good as I had it for my kids. And that's a fundamental shift for me mentally, because you always want to hand the next generation something a little better than you found it. And now I just want it to be as good. And that's a huge mental change for me that I struggle with.
Do you think deep down the majority of folks, and I've got to feel that they do, feel the same way, that they would like to see in the future that their children are even better off than they were?
Yes, I mean, when you ask them, I think if you were to poll them individually, until you start hitting, issues that are near and dear to them personally, I think at some core level, you have to start with the assumption that someone's basically good, but we do have some selfish motives. If you were to say that if you donated heavily to your church, for instance, that I were to do away with the charitable contribution deduction, do you think that would be right? They'd probably say no, because it would disproportionately affect them. At the end of the day, everybody in this country is going to have to be impacted, directly or indirectly, if we're going to solve the problem, period. No way around it.
And one of the things going into next year too, and I think a takeaway point as we're talking today, is folks if they have questions about these kinds of things, they really need to get with you or somebody that can give them some sound advice. I hear so many people, and I know you may as well, but a lot of folks talk to me about this program, or they'll see me out somewhere, or believe it or not, I'll get a phone call and they'll say, well, I think about this, that, or the other, and I'm thinking, wow, that's way off base. And I don't even consider having even a fragment of the knowledge to tell anybody about financial stuff, but they can call you, correct, and set up a time they can come in and talk to you, or talk to you on the phone. You want to give them a number they could reach your office?
Certainly. 910-592-8036 is our main line at the office. The main thing that I'm getting right now from all of my clients primarily is, am I better off, to go ahead and take my lumps now on taxes, or possibly push some of the tax effect out into next year, or what does next year look like for me? And quite honestly, I mean, it's hard for me to advise a client not knowing exactly what next year is going to look like, what the definition of a high net worth individual is. So those things really make planning a difficult environment. I am of the opinion, and I've told clients this, you're probably seeing the lowest tax rates effectively that you'll see in the foreseeable future. Taxes are going to most likely go up. Tax rates may go down, but they'll be going down in concert with limiting deductions or I mean, make no bones about it, the government wants more money. The government needs more money. So it's just how they get there and what shell game they employ to get more money. So if they get there by reducing rates, they're going to have to substantially curtail deductions, which they call tax expenditures in Washington. So the net effect is, don't expect your overall tax burden to go down. It will most likely and almost assuredly go up.
And I think that when we look at the Grover Rehnquist of the world and say we're not going to have a tax increase, the other side of that is we cannot have a tax increase, but we can also do away with some deductions, and we get the same effect.
Well, I mean, I struggle with that. I mean, I hate to paint someone in a box, which is essentially what the Americans for Tax Reform, which Grover Norquist is the head of, making House and Senate leaders take a pledge that they'll never be in favor of a tax increase. You go back to the Bush Sr., read my lips, no new taxes. That cost him a second term. However, never say never. That's one of the things my dad always ingrained in me. There could come a point in time, a national emergency or whatever, and we're almost there. Let's be honest, where tax revenue may have to be raised either by a concert of rising rates and eliminating deductions or whatever. I'd hate to know that all options weren't on the table. But at the same time, both sides have to acknowledge that all options are on the table. Just go back to the numbers we talked about earlier in the show. The high net worth individuals, the tax increases that are on the table, 10% of our annual deficit, okay? That's all that will solve, 10%. So where's the other 90% going to come from?
So we got to look at the rhetoric. The rhetoric is we got to tax the high income folks, and you just pointed out that's not a solution.
No.
That is a small fragment. The same on the other end. If we lay off everybody in the federal government, we're not looking but what, $400-something million. So that's still a small portion. that's the key, I think, when we look at it from people like you that look at numbers, that understand numbers. You're telling us we've got to look at other remedies rather than just these two extremes.
Well, in terms of the chess match, no question, the Democrats played a much better game, and I think they beat the Republicans to the punch on one thing in particular. And everyone will feel this if it doesn't get extended January 1. There's this payroll tax cut. If you're a self-employed individual, you'll understand you've got bookends of a self-employment tax where one half of Social Security and Medicare essentially comes out of someone's check. The employer matches one half. If you work for yourself, you pay both halves of that. Well, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, there was a tax credit for working, if you will, and it was only like $300 or $400. Well, in part of the quest to stimulate the economy, they made a payroll tax cut for everyone in this country that was on a W-2 or self-employed, and it reduced your payroll tax burden by 2%. Now, the employer still had to pay their matching half, but the employee had a 2% pay cut, a 2% tax cut, which meant 2% more in their take-home pay. That's scheduled to go out 1/1. But I'm going to be honest with you, I think it was one of the dumbest ideas that they've ever come up with, because that 2% went in to fund Social Security. And we've got Social Security as one of the programs that we think is causing a budget shortfall for us now and in the foreseeable future, but they took 2% from going into the program. Okay, so at the end of the day, I do think that we've got to find a way to stimulate the economy with more taxes and reduce cuts, but I don't think we're going to do it all at one time.
Mike, we've had a lively conversation. I'll go ahead and extend an invitation. I need to get you back in a month, so maybe we need to talk about this again, because we could spend 2 or 3 hours. I want to make sure I give you time to wrap up, but it sounds like to me just a takeaway point. It's like we've got a car that's using oil and leaking oil, and we either keep pouring oil in it or we fix the motor and don't keep pouring oil in it. So I'll use that analogy as we kind of go away. But I'll give you just a few seconds here to wrap up. And anything you want to say that we need to know before you leave air today?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I guess this whole thing comes back to a moral imperative for me. I think if this crisis gets solved, and I hope it does on a personal and a national level, everyone will see effects directly or indirectly. And at the end of the day, I mean, that's something that you would expect is almost got to happen or will be Greece. I might like to visit Europe, but I don't want to be Europe.
And that's ultimately, from a statistical and accounting point of view, that's where we're headed if it's not fixed. And we're not talking about Band-Aids, we're talking about fixing.
Look at the trajectory. I mean, it's just not sustainable. This is a Band-Aid for a flesh wound.
Thank you for being with us. We appreciate everything that you're doing. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with Michael Chestnut. He's a CPA here in Clinton, and Michael has explained in relative detail some of the things that's going on, what you can anticipate, what the fiscal cliff is. We hope you've enjoyed today's program. We would really like to hear from you. If you would email us at We Should Know, that would be great. That's weshouldknow@gmail.com. We look forward to next week with another program that I'm sure you're going to be interested in. Stay with us, and we'll see you again next week on the radio.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host J.W. Simmons. If you have a question or comment regarding this or any episode, please send your email questions and or comments to jwsimmonsedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday afternoon beginning at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.